I'm excited to talk to you today about becoming a flourishing university, the big bets we must place to foster human flourishing now. These are deeply challenging times to accept an honor such as this and to issue a call for human flourishing. I don't need to tell you that our society is in deep trouble and our current solution sets are not working. People around us are suffering. Fissures and factions are fracturing our sense of connection. The future looks increasingly dim and uncertain, and while we see flashes of hope and human ingenuity, we also see far too plentiful and vivid examples of isolation, greed, and corruption. Given this dark and challenging time, does it make any sense to speak of the idea of human flourishing? I know that suffering people who are swamped in examples of the withering people and institutions have been rendered cynical. I recognize that an absence of public examples will give rise to legions of skeptics, and I certainly personally understand the undertow that accompanies those dark tides. In fact, it is my sense of the pull of those tides that tells me that we must swim harder in another direction in order to create a thriving human future. It is absolutely crucial, now more than ever, to speak with conviction about the possibility of flourishing for both people and institutions. It is equally crucial to marshal the growing evidence from a number of disciplines that support the power of flourishing human beings and their influence on flourishing institutions. To speak and learn and lead with such conviction, in fact, is the only antidote our society has to the darkness that we see gathering around us. Where should we place our bets for the future? I accept this honor and address you today as a grounded optimist. I accept this honor and I address you today with an undiminished belief in the power of human flourishing and with a wide array of evidence to show us the way. And I accept this honor and I address you today, yes, as a researcher, a teacher of almost 40 years, but also as a mother and a grandmother who fervently hopes and believes that we can rise together to the challenge in creating a flourishing future. It is in that spirit of grounded, optimistic research, teaching, mothering, and grandmothering that I want to sum up over 40 years of work by offering you the 4 big bets that I believe we must place right now. Bet number 1, understand human flourishing as a definable, measurable, and achievable state. Work in the field of positive organizational scholarship, as well as positive psychology, social work, public health, public policy, and other disciplines, all point reliably to a valid social science of flourishing. Understand that I'm not speaking metaphorically. I am referring to a definable, measurable state of optimal functioning that is experienced in moments of being engaged, attentive, flexible, energized, alive, and healthy. A wealth of data supports the reality of a state of flourishing that increases people's cognitive, emotional, physiological, and behavioral resources. So we must bet big on the fact that it is possible for all of us to have moments of flourishing and become the architects of our own flourishing and the flourishing of others. Likewise, if we do not regard it as likely that groups, organizations, and social systems can manifest states of flourishing that fuel their collective capabilities, we undermine our ability to create the future that we want to live in. While we have fewer examples and images than we would like to foster our collective imagination, it is possible to find organizations and institutions where flourishing is made manifest in enhanced resilience, innovativeness, collective integrity, safety, and financial and relational wealth. So I'm here to urgently encourage you, whether you're a researcher, a teacher, a leader, or a student at Erasmus University, and by extension to people and institutions everywhere. I am here to urgently encourage you to embrace a courageous approach to positive institutional action that places human flourishing as an imperative for survival. Bet number 2, learn to design, lead, and live in institutions that aim for and support higher quality connections between people. You may not realize that being in a state of mutual responsiveness, felt vitality, and positive regard with another person for under a minute can reshape the entire trajectory of your interaction. But that's the growing consensus from researchers as diverse as developmental educators, neuroscientists, marital therapists, and organizational psychologists. Higher quality connections between people are the micro bits of relationships. When we experience more of them, as we engage in our studies, our work, our family life, or our community engagements, we also experience greater resilience, broadened thinking, higher creativity, more energy, greater commitment, better mental and physical health, and less negativity. We need to bet big on the power of connections as absolutely core to human flourishing. A focus on institutional flourishing also necessitates looking to conditions that enable high-quality connections between people. It's crucial that we learn to think like designers of flourishing. And one key to great design for human flourishing is to look for the routines, those well-grooved, recurrent ways of doing work or accomplishing tasks in a group, and reimagine those routines in ways that allow people to connect to each other in higher quality ways. All organizations can do this. Let me spark your imagination with an example. The University of Edinburgh has adopted an approach to orienting all new students that immediately connects them to others at the university with an emphasis on empathy and compassion as bedrock values that are necessary for successful membership. This change in the university works in conjunction with Scotland adopting a national framework that emphasizes dignity, compassion, and kindness as essential to a well-functioning society. So we can ask ourselves, when students first arrive at Erasmus, how quickly and effectively do the welcoming, orienting, and onboarding routines put them into higher quality connections with their peers, with older students who can serve as guides, and with faculty and staff who can become mentors? It is not only onboarding and welcoming where these questions are powerful. How are students, faculty, staff, and administrators reviewed or evaluated, celebrated, honored, and transitioned into life beyond the university in ways that aim for and support higher quality connections? Think of it this way. Every interaction offers the possibility to leave people better off. Are you maximizing those possibilities? Are universities maximizing those possibilities? Bet number 3, use every means possible to endow activities and people with significance, value, and worth. Human beings are meaning-making, meaning-seeking creatures. How we interpret who we are, who others are, and what we are doing together has potent consequences for flourishing. Positive organizational scholarship and other approaches to flourishing have given us 3 ways to think about endowing ourselves, endowing others, and actions with the significance and worth that supports flourishing. First, as part of this big bet on positive meaning, I encourage universities to focus on human strengths. When we help people understand, value, and use their strengths, and when we insist that we do this for ourselves as well, we know from research that we and others will feel more competent, experience more satisfaction in our effort, become more engaged in what we're doing, and perform more effectively. The second aspect of this big bet on positive meaning calls us to illuminate the impacts that people and their work have on others around them. Many studies have validated the essential idea that the more people can interpret their work as having positive impact or making a contribution to others, the more they can summon energy to persist in tasks and engage in higher overall levels of performance. How many of you listening right now can tell a story of your work and how it makes a positive contribution to someone else? How many of the Erasmus faculty and staff members can tell a story of how their work has benefited the alumni of the university? Leaders of Erasmus, how might you design your units to provide more feedback like this, feedback that emphasizes contributions and thereby supports flourishing? The third aspect of this big bet on positive meaning is an emphasis on organizational purpose that helps members interpret their organization as an entity of significance, of value, and of worth. This kind of meaning in our organizations leads to higher levels of commitment and attachment, more working on behalf of the institution, and lower levels of turnover. I have listened to the mission of Erasmus University and its aspiration to be a source of positive societal impact. I feel supported in making this kind of meaning. I'm impressed by the university's explicit commitment to a positive organizational identity, and I would bet big on the value of integrating this mission into more and more of the organization's routines, its rituals, and its cultural artifacts. Bet number 4, value, express, and share positive emotions as essential to every activity. Emotions are often derided as inessential to work or to learning. Yet some of the most robust research in areas as vast as genetics, psychology, and medicine demonstrate that a steady diet of positive feelings is one of the most potent sources of health, well-being, and longevity available to us. When we work, lead, and live in ways that produce more gratitude, just to name one positive emotion, we also experience healthier heart rhythms, better sleep, lower stress, less anxiety, more generosity, and greater compassion. The bet on positive emotions is one of the most difficult to realize in practice, not because it's hard to tap into positive emotions, but because positive emotions are stigmatized and undervalued in many organizations. Taking joy in the work we do is rarely lauded as an important and explicit organizational goal. Even in universities, sadly, cultivating fascination, interest, curiosity, and excitement do not often appear on course objectives or in our evaluation tools. Please don't let this stigma and positive emotions' undervalued nature fool you. Positive emotions are essential. Any meeting, gathering, celebration, or recognition ceremony that goes by without taking advantage of the opportunity it provides for cultivating inspiration, awe, and pride is truly an opportunity lost. In the undergraduate class that we teach, focused on flourishing at work at the University of Michigan, we begin each session with an interaction that opens up the possibility of gratitude, pride, happiness, or other positive emotions. Making this a part of the class routine changes the possibilities for the entire class. The consistent positive emotions unlock resourcefulness in the collective that enables better learning, more curiosity and exploration, more courageous experimentation, and significant leaps in growth that enable our students to see themselves as change agents and to do the work of creating flourishing in their worlds. I invite you to reimagine your participation and leadership in this institution and others in ways that evoke and amplify these kinds of positive emotions as a source of flourishing for yourself and for others. When I stand back from these 4 big bets and look at them all together, they form what I've called the flourishing triangle. The simultaneous and reinforcing optimal functioning of people and institutions is at the center of the triangle. High-quality connections, positive meaning, and positive emotions, which are connected and interact with each other, are the 3 major contributors and supporters of this state of optimal functioning. Some of my favorite studies as a researcher have been those that helped me to see the power and the potency of the flourishing triangle. So as I conclude my time with you today, I want to mention 2 of those studies and draw lessons from them to renew our vision for a flourishing future. Almost 25 years ago, I did a study with Amy Wisniewski and Glide Debeba on hospital cleaners. The study surprised us. It opened our eyes to the numerous ways that many of the cleaners were crafting their jobs to include participation in the care for hospital patients and their families. Without explicit mention in their job descriptions, these cleaners altered their roles to provide comfort by talking to patients and families, to ease patients' anxieties by delivering extra blankets, and they altered their roles to reduce visitors' uncertainty by giving directions when people were lost. As the cleaners explained the reasons that they did these things, they described how these actions made them see the positive impacts of their work on others. They felt love and gratitude as they did these things. They connected with others in ways that energized and sustained them through the less desirable and much more exhausting parts of their work. The cleaners taught us how they could become the agents of their own flourishing. Shortly after the study with the cleaners, I engaged in a study of a hospital billing unit with Peter Frost, Monica Warline, Jacoba Lilius, Jason Canov, and Sally Maitlis, all the original members of the first Compassion Lab. This billing unit was extraordinary in its performance, one of the best in the state and its industry in terms of the amount of time it took them to collect funds on behalf of the hospital's physicians. What interested us was not only its excellent task performance, but the fact that this excellence was accompanied by enhanced flourishing of all the unit members. Every member of the unit described vivid stories of compassion toward fellow employees and towards the clients. Analysis of this unit opened our eyes to the centrality of an ecology of everyday practices that enabled unit members to feel more compassion together, to make more meaning of their work, and to connect more genuinely and lovingly with each other as they supported one another to live and work at their best. We learned that these everyday ways of conducting themselves and getting the work done cultivated a social tissue of connection that was higher quality. This study, among many others, has convinced me that if we look more closely at the everyday grooved ways of doing things in organizations, we can see clues to what sorts of collective capacities and capabilities our actions are building. A lens that takes flourishing seriously commands that we consider how to put everyday routines and practices in the service of collective strengths like compassion, generosity, courage, integrity, and fostering the best of the human condition. I hope that this reflection on the inspiring mission of Erasmus University is a catalyst for more use of the flourishing triangle here as you undertake with grounded optimism the work of creating a flourishing future. The flourishing triangle is a guide to where we might need to place the big bets of our time, not only for our lives and our livelihoods, but also for the flourishing institutions we want so fervently to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. Thank you for the inspiration of your example and for the honor of being with you today.